Well, according to my Doctor Who watches, everything seems good. Big load of my mind. Oh, God. Anyway. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, for another multi-voice review. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, folks. You know, ever since I did the review of Roger Corman's Frankenstein Unbound, I thought to myself, I think it's time I should review, and also a little history, to talk about a woman who started it all. That's right, folks. I'm going to talk about the woman who started Frankenstein way back. Sorry, I thought I saw a horsefly buzzing around. Anyway, first, a little history. Way back in the 1880s, this 18-year-old Mary Shelley hung around with a young, handsome, good-looking guy who goes by the name of Percy Shelley, and he was also hanging around with his best friend, who is a poet, who goes by the name of Lord Byron. Now, Lord Byron, he was a poet and wrote a lot of stories about vampires and such. But when Mary Shelley, who was spending the night with Percy and Lord Byron, she kept having nightmares during the thunderstorms. It was happening where she was at. She kept having nightmares about a guy who keeps creating life out of dead corpses and such. And after those nightmares she kept having, she decided to write it all down in the book. And there, Frankenstein was born. And of course she also picks up some names and such. Turns out that there really is a family who goes by the name of Frankenstein. If you ever go to Germany, there really is a castle called Castle Frankenstein. Except it's not the Frankenstein you think. It's, Frankenstein are the royal family who's been around, about the same time when Vlad the Impaler was, spreading fear to everybody by impaling people. So there's a historical fact of Frankenstein versus Dracula, except it's the Frankenstein royal family against Vlad the Impaler. But anyway, and of course there were some other notified facts that also Mary Shelley based Frankenstein from this one man. Now, his name escapes me, but a lot of people say that he was a mad, obsessive scientist who does the same thing like Frankenstein did. And even he wrote a book. He was writing himself more like a diary, except he changes names. He wrote a book called Frankensteiner, who actually, it was just a story about him and what he's been doing. Until he died from accidentally poisoning himself. But he was quite a, I mean, a lot of people say that he's an alchemist. You know, magic. And, but he was really sick in the head. I mean, he collected limbs, he collected bones, he collected blood. I mean, he was really out there. But he became one of the inspiration of Mary Shelley and her idea of the modern Prometheus, aka Frankenstein. Now, after she wrote her book, it pretty much got Lord Byron and Percy Shelley interest that they told Mary Shelley that she should write the story down and have it published. So after she wrote her book, well, the book of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was born. But here's one thing I also discover. Mary Shelley had a hard time trying to get her book published. I know some of you have seen Mary Shelley movie starring Elle Fanning. But, yeah. She really had a hard time trying to get her book published because back in the 1800s, let's just say that most of the men are not exactly fair to women. That's one part of history I really hate. Men not treating women equally or giving them the fair thing that they deserve. But of course, I heard there are some people who are doing the same thing, but for religious reasons. And I hate them. Anyway, back to the stories. After she was fighting to get her book published and get a lot of credit for it, they were like, okay, we decided to publish your book, and your name would be remembered. Even though they wanted her husband, Percy Shelley, to take the credit, but Percy was like, nah, let my wife have it. That's fair. That's really fair, actually. And then years later, when I heard about her husband, Percy Shelley, who died from drowning, and of course, sadly, I heard that Mary Shelley's sons and daughters died prematurely. So I had to say, it's pretty much a sad end to Mary Shelley. Heck, even I feel sorry for the poor girl. Anyway, when the book became a huge inspiration, and of course when Mary Shelley made the story of Frankenstein, it opened up the doors to the entire world of science fiction. No more fantasy, but science. Science fiction theories, this is why I like science fiction so much, folks, because science fictions are not exactly some kind of a cult worship or something like that, like what L. Ron Hubbard does. But, science fiction is just a franchise for us to enjoy. For us to enjoy and make us think about the future. That's what it is. I mean, you never know, in the future, we might be able to travel through space and probably meet life out there. Now, even though I don't believe in aliens, but if there is a scientific proof out there that aliens do exist, I'll stand corrected. And also, and of course, there is a possibility that one of these days, I heard that there are certain machines that really does work. I mean, robots was a huge thing in stories, and some of them do make stories about robots who rebelled until Isaac Asimov written I, Robot, which was a pretty good story. Forget about the movie. But it kind of makes us think about, if we ever created robots, at least give them the program to teach them the difference between right and wrong. We don't want to have a robot who acts like a Frankenstein monster, right? Think about it. Anyway, when Frankenstein became a huge inspiration to everybody, that they decided that people decided to make plays of Frankenstein. And each and every play they made of Frankenstein became a huge smash hit. Until when the movies started. And then, back in 1910, inventor and credit stealer Thomas Edison, he did invent a camera. Although, I don't know if he literally did invent a camera, or there was somebody else who invented it before he did. But he was the one who created his own moving pictures, and therefore created the very first genuine movie monster, which is not a first horror movie ever made, and it's not even the first science fiction, but this was the very first movie monster ever made. And the movie monster is Frankenstein. Now, even though it was a silent picture at the time, audience had learned how to scream. Now, the first time this movie was made, it frightened the movie people out of their seats, because they were amazed of what they showed. Now, one thing I have to say about this movie, it's in the public domain, so you guys can check it out yourself and watch it yourself. But this movie was made for like 10 minutes. But for a movie this short, it was a beginning of horror movie monsters. Now, what's it all about? It starts with Dr. Frankenstein, who is so obsessed of creating life, so he created a living corpse. Now, a little bit of interesting special effects thing is, one time they made the dummy of the monster going like this, and somebody just use another camera and shoot him, you know, have the puppet monster go like this, and then they burned it so it looks like it's melting. And of course, when they finally got done of the entire dummy of the monster getting all melted into ashes, what they use is they rewind it to look like that Frankenstein instantly created life from the ashes and fire. And of course, when Frankenstein finally saw his monster was made, he was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so hideous!" And then the monster haunts Frankenstein. Every time when Frankenstein tries to be alone, the monster appears right in front of Frankenstein. And then, at the end of the movie, Frankenstein enchanted himself into the mirror. So anytime if Frankenstein looks himself into a mirror, the monster will be there haunting him. And that was the first Frankenstein movie ever made. And the actor who played the monster, he goes by the name of Charles Ogle. Yep, that's right. This is his name, Charles Ogle. He's the guy who played the monster. And they kind of make him a little like half kabuki, half Klum. And of course the actor who played Dr. Frankenstein is Austin Phillips. Austin Phillips here played Dr. Frankenstein in that silent movie. And of course Elizabeth is in that silent movie. So the actress who played Elizabeth is none other than Mary Fuller. She played Mary Shelley back in the silent era. And of course, I found this picture, and it's a wax figure of what the monster looked like in the silent era. The monster looked like this. There's the mirror, and there's the poster. And this is supposed to what Charles Ogle looked like in the silent movie. And then after Edison's Frankenstein movie was made, turns out there was another Frankenstein movie. Except they didn't call it Frankenstein, I guess from a certain legal purpose that Edison owned the title Frankenstein. But there really is another Frankenstein movie, and it was called Life Without a Soul. Now, this movie was made probably back in 1913 or 1912 or maybe 1914. But the biggest problem is that you're never going to have a chance to see this movie is because, well, a long time ago, not many people know that the material that people were using back then to make movies and make film, not many people know it has a mixture of a certain chemical substance that it's flammable. So pretty much, a big Hollywood studio got caught on fire, and most of the movies they made in history was all lost. So pretty much, Life Without a Soul is lost and never be found. Along with London After Midnight And of course I heard about this Japanese King Kong movie before the American version of King Kong. Now, I know what you're thinking, folks. You guys are thinking, hey, Multi-Voice, why aren't you talking about the Universal Frankenstein movies or the Hammer ones? Well, here's the thing. They're on their own franchise. The only way I can review the Universal Frankenstein, you see, I'm hoping that one of these days I'm going to get a Blu-ray collection of Universal classic monster movies so I could I can make a marathon of Universal Monsterthon for October. And for Hammer, well, I haven't seen all the Hammer all the Hammer Frankenstein movies. I saw most of the Dracula ones, but sooner or later, I'm gonna review Hammer Frankenstein along with Hammer Dracula. I've been trying to get Dracula's attention and ask him to review the Hammer version of Dracula, and he was like, I will be delighted. So one of these days he's gonna review Dracula and I'll review Frankenstein for the Hammer genre. But those Hammer Frankensteins and those Universal Frankensteins, they're not, I mean, some of the stuff are based from Mary Shelley, but not completely. Although I do like Bride of Frankenstein, where Ursula... Dang. Excuse me a minute. Ursula Lanchester. That's her name. She's the one who played the bride in Bride of Frankenstein, but in the beginning of Bride of Frankenstein, she also played Mary Shelley. So, and there are like tons and tons and tons and tons of Frankenstein movies out there, which I don't even want to, that I don't even think I'm able to talk about. I mean, there is Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, which back then, in the 70s, they say it's an X-rated movie, but right now it's just more of an R-rated movie, to say the least. And I already seen Andy Warhol's Dracula. And also there is Black Frankenstein, aka Blackenstein, and also the worst one of all, Frankenhooker. Oh, that movie was terrible. Unbelievably terrible. And trust me, you do not want to watch it. It's that bad. But anyway, enough with all the other Frankenstein stuff. Let's get to the Mary Shelley one, huh? And then back in 1994, now before the big movie created by Kenneth Branagh came out, there was another one which was TNT. It was a TNT version of Frankenstein, which was a lot closer to the original novel than Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein. Although it's called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it's directed and starred by Kenneth Branagh. Kenneth Branagh plays Dr. Frankenstein in this, and also Robert De Niro plays the monster. You talking to me? Eh? You talking to me? Eh? You talking to me? I see nobody here, so you talking to me? Eh? You talking to me? Eh? I always love doing Robert De Niro. You talking to me? Are you talking to me? You smooch my wife? You smooch my wife? I say smooch because I don't want to cuss. But you know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. Eh? Eh? I'll be watching you. And of course, the lovely, gothic, and Mrs. Tim Burton herself, Helen Bonham Carter, who plays Elizabeth. Yeah, that's right. Helen Bonham Carter plays Elizabeth in this movie. Did you know that she was once almost typecast as the lovely Victorian lady? 'Cause before she was married to Tim Burton, she always played the the lovely, pretty Victorian girl that every guy always fell head over heels for. But ever since she married Tim Burton, now most of her characters, she's being typecast as the weird lady, as a weird woman. Although I do have an odd suspicion why Tim Burton always have her characters get killed. Is it like Tim Burton's way that he really wants to kill his wife? No, never mind. And then after that, there were hardly any Frankenstein based on Mary Shelley's novel lately, until I saw one that it was completely based from Mary Shelley's novel. And this one was made in Hallmark. And it was back in 2004. 1 year before I graduated. Hallmark Frankenstein. Starring Alec Newman as Frankenstein. And as you can see here, Donald Sutherland, he plays the ship's captain, Captain Walden? Oh yeah, Captain Walden. Donald Sutherland, he plays Captain Walden, while William Hurt here, he plays Professor Wallman. And he's the professor who gets Frankenstein interested. Last time I ever heard that character, he was played by John Cleese on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now, this one was very close to the original novel, and the monster who is in the movie, played by Luke Gus, he played the monster. Which I have to say, it's a lot more close to the original novel, because in the original novel, if you ever paid attention or read the novel, or listened to the audiobooks like I do, the monster itself, he looks like a normal average man who just looks like a normal guy with long hair. But the problem with him is, it's his skin color and his eyes. Which, in the Hallmark, they left that out, but they did make his skin kind of yellowish. But in the original novel, the monster's skin was completely yellow, and his eyes were glowing yellow. And that's Frankenstein for you, right there. And one thing I do have to admit, that the author who written Frankenstein Unbound, he took like half of Mary Shelley's novel and just added a character from the future. And of course, Roger Corman did the same. So, that's my review for the day of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So for those of you who likes this review, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe. And, oh yeah, a little update for you guys about my audio drama. My audio drama is going pretty good. I did all the voices. I had like 196 lines, and I did it all. And I sent them to a friend of mine because, honestly, I don't have an audio studio to make my own audio drama. So I'm sending it to my friend so he could make it for me. Now, I don't know if I can upload it in my channel or his. So it's a big mystery to me. But in my second episode, I'm going to deal with Frankenstein yet again, and also Cybermen, and involves my companion, who is a former Cyberman who wants to be human, and her name is Hannah. And also, the biggest thing of all, Mary Shelley and the monster is going to be in my second episode. Now, I am writing it, but I'm kind of juggling between two different Doctor Who's. I'm doing one where I'm the Doctor, and the other one where somebody else is playing the Doctor, but I'm also playing the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, I have a soft spot for the Wizard of Oz, so... And it's called Doctor Who, the Doctor of Oz. So, and my next review, folks, you guys think that Frankenstein is the very first science fiction story... Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the very first science fiction story ever written in history. But what was the very first science fiction movie ever made? Even back in the silent era. And it's not Frankenstein. This one is created by a French artist. And it's called The Trip to the Moon. So my next review, I'm going to review a silent film called The Trip to the Moon. So, stay tuned. And this is Multi-Voice Reviewer or Multi-Voice Doctor telling you all. See you soon.